Welcome to Keeping It Real, the largest podcast made by real estate agents and for real estate agents. My name is DJ Paris. I am your guide and host through the show. Today is our monthly series called Unpopular Real Estate Opinions with Chris Linsell. Now, Chris is a real estate technology analyst. He's also the director of content at large for Luxury Presence. He specializes in new solutions to old questions, constantly exploring the cutting edge of technology in the real estate space. Now, Chris also has many years of experience as a licensed realtor in the state of Michigan. He's worked as a marketer, he's worked as a digital strategist, and a trainer for major national brands like Berkshire Hathaway Home Services of Michigan, as well as Coldwell Banker Schmidt Realtors. Chris is, again, the director of content with Luxury Presence. He's an accomplished musician, actor, and speaker. You will see him often at NAR events, Inman events, as well as even regional and local association events. So he's engaged with audiences in sizes ranging from 30 to 3,000. To learn more about Chris and his speaking schedule and to connect with Chris, chrislinsell.com is where you go. Chris, great to see you.
DJ, it's a pleasure to be back. How are you? Everything
I'm
good?
I think so. I think it's a strange time for us.
Yep.
I think it's a strange time for agents. It's a strange time for brokers. I know there's so much in the air. We have the August 17th date looming, coming pretty close, and we're all, our brokerages at least that I speak to, are scrambling to ready the agents in making sure that they have something to say on August 18th, and what to say and how to present to clients. And it's all very interesting, and certainly we're seeing a lot of news stories out there talking about these upcoming changes and sort of what it means for the industry. And for example, will we see 0% co-op commissions become normalized, or not? And there's a lot of other issues, of course, at play too. So curious to get your thoughts on what's going on in the state of real estate right now.
Yeah, boy, there's a lot going on, and I feel like there's a handful of different topics that I feel like I feel like are generating conversation, especially among the agents that I spend time with and the brokers that I spend time with in this space. Certainly, the NAR stuff continues to be a conversation that dominates the passion of many agents, because people feel very strongly about it. Inventory levels and just the current trajectory of the market, independent of all the NAR conversation, is also something that's challenging. And generating a lot of conversation. And then there are other national stories around housing that are putting the wind in the sails of the media machine too, and generating good conversation, but also some misconceptions that are worth talking about. And I would love to chat a little bit about that, specifically about some of the rent control policies that have been proposed. So
Yeah, let's start there. So Biden has a rent control initiative.
Yeah.
And it hasn't really received as much attention, of course, with the more serious news that has happened in the last several weeks with former President Trump and current President Biden. So I know it's not maybe as front above the fold maybe on major news sites, but it is something that I'm glad we're talking about, because I don't hear too many other people talking about it.
Yeah, so just to be like, to get everyone in the know on this, I'm not going to go into all of the details because most of them are boring and not really relevant to this conversation. But the big headline here is that the Biden administration has proposed a rent control policy that would limit the ability of landlords to raise rent by more than 5% per calendar year, or per since the last time rent was raised. So the goal of this in a vacuum is to create more stability in rent prices, such that it cannot be tenants cannot be priced out of apartments with dramatic rent changes. And there is precedent for this sort of policy um, in other areas of housing. For instance, in the state of Michigan, there is a floor and ceiling to property tax moves, such that property taxes in the state of Michigan, where I'm based, can't fluctuate by more than 5% per year, regardless of what the appraised value of your property is. So if the market is moving very aggressively, even if your property jumps in value by 10% or 20% over the course of a year or 2 years, your property taxes cannot move more than 5% in either direction, by 5%, for that calendar year. And this is the thought process here is the same. But here's why this is a terrible idea, and my relatively unpopular opinion. I'm sure I'm going to get some crap for this, so bring it on, people. Here's why this is a terrible plan, from a rent control perspective. If landlords can only raise or hypothetically lower rent by 5% max each year, this is going to mean that they have to then use secondary means of tenant evaluation in order to get the right tenant into their property. They can't use who can afford this property, because there's going to be a lot more people who can afford a property if rent can't move commiserate to the market. So that means that landlords are going to have 100 applications on apartments when they were only getting 20 before. And if they're getting 100 applications, who are they going to choose here? Based on those 100 applications, they're going to choose the people who are absolutely positively the ones who are going to give them the best chance at not having a single late rent payment.
Right.
Thus, rent control is going to benefit the people who likely need it the least. In fact, there are stories of rent control happening in states like Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia in the South, where they have some rent control, but the restrictions are relatively unsophisticated, and so landlords can only raise rent by a certain percentage, but there's actually no other restrictions put on place. So they'll get 50 applications for the apartment. They say, okay, they essentially turn it into a bidding war for the other terms of the rent contract. Like, I'll pay you all my rent in advance for the entire
Sure.
year, or I will pay like a optional pet deposit that is not a part of the security deposit that is exorbitant. It becomes a Hunger Games sort of scenario where the least able to compete become the least helped by rent control. And so ultimately, though I understand the Biden administration's heart is in the right place by trying to create some normalcy when it comes to rents, especially in major metropolitan markets where they can be quite volatile, instilling rent control is not the solution to the problem.
Yeah, so basically just to recap, the idea is if I'm a investor and I own a apartment building and now I am restricted on my rent, my annual rent raise, to protect the tenants is of course the theory of protect them from having to move, because maybe I want to increase rents by more than 5% to get a different maybe caliber of tenant, or I just want to make more money. And obviously preventing the tenant from having to find another apartment to live in.
Mhm.
But you're right. I have, I'll give you an example. I have a friend, well, it creates a lot of unintended consequences, but a pretty obvious one you just mentioned, which is increased competition for that rent controlled
Big
apartment.
time.
Yeah. I have a friend in San Francisco, and this is not uncommon in San Francisco. The stories are probably more common than not, where I don't know his actual income, but I'll say it's north of 300,000 a year, somewhere in that category. He has a rent controlled apartment that he pays like less than $2,000 a month for, and it is, it's tiny because it's San Francisco, but it normally would go for like 6,000.
Mhm.
And he's just kind of locked in, and he got that apartment because he had a huge income and he was likely to pay. And I don't know who he was up against, but on paper he looked pretty good.
Mhm.
Now, is it really benefiting who it's supposed to in
Mhm.
his situation? No, not really. He makes enough money to be able to pay more, but of course, who would pay more for something if they could pay less? So, the ethics of that is not what I'm debating. Just the reality is people are going to gravitate towards that. So increased competition
100%.
is going to create an issue. I wonder if if there is a solution to that where you could still uh, put a cap on them without that unintended consequence of increased competition.
I'll tell you what, there is a clear solution to this problem, and it is rent control in the form of inventory control. If we put in place, and this is not something that can be done at the federal level, frankly, this is a local decision that can be supported by state and federal programs to help mandate things into the right direction. If we absolutely tore the roof off the housing density restrictions in the communities where we need housing the most, we would put in place de facto rent control by virtue of balancing the inventory on the market. It is simple economics. And if you've been in the real estate space for longer than 8 seconds, you understand when there are lots of choices on the market, prices tend to go down. It is just the reality of supply and demand economics. Now, of course, there's going to be hooks and ladders that wind up creating temporary artificial imbalances in any community. But generally speaking, if you have 100 people looking for apartments and only 3 to choose from, it doesn't matter what restrictions you apply to this market to bring rent down. You are not solving the problem. You do solve the problem by creating inventory kind local markets that incentivize either the building of new units or the subdividing of existing units such that we create more inventory for people to choose from. Because frankly, the opposite argument here is that we just need less people to live in our areas. And if you ask any politician, if you ask any community member with some common sense, the idea of your community shrinking is not commiserate with the idea of your community's being prosperous. A shrinking community is not a prosperous community. It just these things are they don't line up. So if you want to solve for this, solve for it by putting policies in place that encourage new inventory, not rent control on the existing inventory.
So let the free market work, assuming that developers are allowed to build where they want in those communities that need the service the most.
Yeah, I would say that that's true, but I mean, it's not even free market. I mean, that there is some of that, but like think about it like this. And if you're watching me on video, you're going to see me visualize this with my hands. The rent control is like putting a downward pressure on prices in order to try and get people closer to rent that they can afford. That's a market control. I'm actually proposing a different market control, which is upward pressure on the amount of inventory.
Yeah.
We should be putting policies in place that are goosing the building or restructuring of the existing inventory to provide more people with opportunities and choices. That is also a market control. I am not advocating for pure free market real estate here because, frankly, we don't that would be chaos in a lot of markets. I mean, you would see people, I'm not exaggerating, that you would see city parks being put up for sale to the highest bidder.
Sure.
Because I mean, there's a whole bunch of land here. We don't need swing sets here. We need apartment buildings. That's not what I'm advocating. I'm
Sure.
advocating for common sense solutions that provide for policies in place with our existing infrastructure to get more units. And it can even be like, here's a great example of one. We can provide housing in like city suburbs, loosen the restrictions on building in certain suburbs, and then increase the investment in public transportation from that suburb into the city center. These are market flexes. And The bad news is these don't take 3 months to fix things. They take 3 years or 30 years to fix things. But
Mhm.
we're living in a society here, people. This is a systemic issue that is not going to be fixed in 3 months. We need to be committed to the long term here, because you're going to live here in 3 years. Don't you want it to be good, even if it takes that long?
Right. Yeah, that's a really strong point. Speaking of inventory, I
Yeah.
know you had some thoughts about the current state of a home inventory, so
Yeah.
purchase and sale inventory. Um, Tell us sort of where we're at and what that means currently.
Yeah, CoreLogic recently released some stats for the month of May into June, that the average American market is sitting on around 3.5 months of home inventory. And if you're not familiar with this measure, inventory is home inventory by months is measured by um, looking at the current demand for property and for homes, and saying, if no inventory, if no new property were added to the current market, how long would it take us to sell through what we currently have based on the current demand? And so a healthy, balanced market is about 6 months of inventory. We are currently sitting at around 3.5 months of inventory. So clearly, we are in a seller's market. There's more demand for homes than we have supply. And once you get past 3 months of inventory, you move into unhealthy territory. Once you get down into the 3 months, 2.5 months, 2 months of inventory, those are they can be fun times if you are representing sellers, because you get like, I mean, remember, like, following COVID. I mean, this was following COVID. We saw inventory levels of like less than 2 months, and you'd put a property on the market and you'd get 6 offers before you had your first showing. It was kind of fun from a like a uh, Martin Scorsese kind of movie perspective, but this isn't the real world. This is, I mean, it's fun for one person and a nightmare for the rest of us. We are currently tottering on this like seller's market, even an unhealthy seller's market. And there's some interesting takeaways here, including some of the strategies that real estate professionals can start to implement in their business for the remainder of this year. We're moving into the second half of the year. What do you do with this information? So lots of cool things to kind of talk through here.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So low inventory, we know, of course, drives prices up.
Hmm.
We've seen rates kind of basically stay kind of where they're in the low sevens at this point. I think as of today, and this summer it's been right around there. So a lot of buyers who are maybe still sitting on the fence, waiting for rates to come down, but more importantly, just not seeing the inventory to be able to
Hmm.
put offers in.
Hmm.
So if I'm an agent and I am working with a buyer right now,
Hmm.
and we're dealing with this, geez, I just, every time we go to look for something, it gets taken. What might I be talking to my buyers about to sort
Hmm.
of prepare them for this inventory crunch,
Hmm.
and what can they do to sort of stay ahead of that curve, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. So there's a couple of things I would say here, and this is I'm going to share yeah, a little unpopular, I guess. Um, if you are a buyer's agent right now, I'm going to tell you the script right now that you need to use if you want to be successful in this market. And I'm going to dovetail this conversation with uh, with the conversations that agents are having across the country around the NAR lawsuit settlement stuff. Right now, real estate agents, especially buyers representatives, are being forced to demonstrate their value in order to justify their commission. There is a, almost literal sing for your supper scenario happening here. Um, and you can use this as an advantage when talking through buyer strategy right now. And here's what you do. You say, talking to your buyer, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, am I the first real estate agent you've worked with in your life, if they're not first-time home buyers, they're obviously going to say, "No, I've worked with somebody before." You say, "Okay, in your previous experience, has there been times when you said when you were interested in a home, but you just couldn't get in on time, you didn't get a chance to see it, you didn't know about it until it was under contract?" If they've bought or sold a home in the last 10 years, the answer is almost certainly going to be yes. So here's what you do. You take that information and you say, "Listen, it's no secret. Real estate commissions have been in the news lately. It is up to buyers agents to clearly demonstrate their value to their clients in order to have good conversations around how much money I make as your representative. I can tell you this. Right now, we have X months of inventory in our market. This means that we're going to feel really competitive. There's going to be a lot of people out there. I'm going to be biasing my strategy towards getting you into the homes that you want to see before as many other people as possible. In fact, I want to get you into things before they even hit the market. I want to get you into things the second they go live. I am going to prove my value to you, not just by my advice, but by my access. I'm going to prove my value to you, not just by my experience, but by my ability to position you timing wise in a competitive market such that you can provide the best offer before other people even have a chance to make theirs. In short, if you have buyers who are asking you, how are we going to be successful, and at the same time they're going to say, oh, and by the way, how much are you getting paid, and do I have to pay you this, and are you really worth that much? You say to yourself, you remember that last buyer experience you had? That's not going to happen with me. And if it does happen with me, clearly I'm not worth this money. But since it won't, I am. And you can interlink your understanding of a tight market with low inventory and these low inventory numbers with your value as an agent and get people to the closing table faster. Is this like a kumbaya strategy? No. You are pitting yourself against the other agents in your market and saying, like, listen, these suckers aren't going to get you in there faster. I'm going to get you in there. I know the people who are going to get you in there faster. This is unlikely to have you win the Miscongeniality Award at your association banquet in November. But play by the rules and don't be mean to people, but don't be afraid to get aggressive. That's how you're going to win right now.
Yeah, so I'd love to dive just a little bit deeper into this. So I really love that script, and I hope our listeners can go back by the way, we provide transcriptions
Mm,
for all of our episodes. If you can't find them, reach out to us. I think they should be within the episode. You can usually find it. But Chris gave a great script there, and my follow up question as the buyer to the buyer's agent to that script would say, "Great, I'd love to know specifically how are you going to get me access to those properties first? How am I going to be first in line? Can you tell me a little bit about that strategy?"
mhm. Well, so there are a handful of things. Um, if a buyer asks me this, that I am going to say. The first thing I'm going to say is I'm plugged into X number of agent networks that are going to get me information before it hits the MLS and before it hits Zillow. Here's some good examples of this. Women's Council of Realtors
Yeah.
is a closed group that if you are not a part of, you are missing out. Um, another one is all brokerages that I've ever been a part of have early coming soon meetings. Like they have haves and needs meetings on a weekly basis. If you don't have one of these going, you should start one in your brokerage. And if you don't have one of these going in your brokerage, you should be considering other brokerages, frankly. But the haves and needs meeting, you can emphasize this with your clients. The other thing that you can be thoughtful and emphasizing about, and thoughtful and emphasizing, is your connection to the preferred vendors that you work with within the industry, and start a conversation with these folks on a weekly basis. Here's a great example of this. I have in my local market a preferred inspector, a preferred appraiser, a preferred home renovation specialist. I have house cleaners, I have mortgage professionals, I have title companies. When I was working full time in this space, I had a weekly email that would go to these folks. And for some of them that I had good relationships with, like, near friendship relationships with, these would be text messages. They would know on Monday they're going to hear from Chris. Hey, I've got X clients that are looking for A, B, and C right now. Have you heard anything that you think that would indicate you've got that our houses are coming? I cannot tell you how many times the home cleaners and the home renovators texted me back. Oh yeah, I just cleaned the house of over on 123 Main Street. They mentioned that they were getting ready to list the property for sale. Um, it does not take rocket science to do this on a weekly basis. And in fact, once you establish this sort of regular routine, these folks reach out to you.
Right.
And
It-
and then, like, I'm not compensating them for the individual referrals. That's illegal. But what I am doing is on a quarterly and then just a spontaneous basis, I'm shooting them a gift card to downtown Traverse City. I'm getting them a restaurant. I'm buying them lunch at X, Y, and Z. I'm building relationships by means of incentivizing good communication. It works, guys. It doesn't happen overnight, but it works.
Yeah, I know a lot of agents. So for anyone out there that's sorry, I interrupted myself. I was going to say for agents that have done successful transactions with other agents at other firms, this is a great time to reach out and reconnect with those agents. Say, hey, I just wanted to touch base. I felt like we did a great job on XYZ property. And just so you know, I have really motivated buyers right now. So if you ever have something coming down the pike, feel free to let me know about it, and I would be honored to give you feedback and present this first to my clients. So
Mhm.
you're right. I think it's a proactive play. You have to reach out to. In your case, the vendor example was a great one because I wasn't totally sure where you were going to go with that. I was like, how are the vendors going to know? Oh, well, of course they work on properties. They are going to know things like that. So
Mhm.
that's a great divorce attorneys. Another great one.
Huge. Oh,
Um,
yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
it's a unfortunate, but technically a good source of home need people who with those needs. So I think that's right. So that's an interesting play. The hey, Mister and Mrs. Buyer, you know, here's how it used to work is with respect to finding a property, paying your agent, going through really the explanation of compensation, but also services, right? You really talked about, in the past, buyer agents didn't have to do too much
Mhm.
to collect a check. I mean, it's not that they didn't work hard. Of course they work hard. I'm sorry, I misspoke. They didn't have to do much explaining to the client to be able to collect the check at the end of that successful transaction.
Mhm.
And they should have, but they didn't, they didn't. And so here we are. But now we have this opportunity, and you've been saying this for months and months, to really distinguish ourselves as an agent.
Mhm.
Why are we getting paid,
Mhm.
X percent? Well, and now I think it may be a bit uncomfortable to have those conversations with buyers, but only really because the fear of the unknown and doing something new,
Mhm.
and having the buyer say, I don't want to pay that, right?
Mhm.
Yes, those are challenges, and there's hopefully going to be some solutions. I don't know if anyone can come to the rescue there. Perhaps maybe a lender one day will figure out a way to load a commission into a purchase. But for now, you can at least say, here's why I charge what I charge, and
Mhm.
here's what I'm actually going to do. And then, of course, you have to do it, which
Mhm.
is the hardest part. But I think that's a very interesting idea. So, years ago we used to say clients don't need the buyer's agent to look to find a property because there's access to that everywhere, and there still is access to that everywhere. And so now you really have to dive into those private listing networks or other brokerages if you don't have one that does have a coming soon kind of a inventory pool,
Mhm.
and really just connecting with those agents who get deals closed and saying, hey, let's work together here. You have, I'll send, I'll let you know when I've got something, and vice versa. And then those vendor partners, I love
Mhm.
that sending them business, of course, as well, but
Mhm.
making sure that they know specifically what you need and how you can service their clients and make them look good.
Yep, 100%. And, on that, you mentioned something, that I know this is not wasn't on our agenda to talk about, but I did wanna tell you, on the note of a lender rolling, finding a way to roll commissions into loans, I'm starting to hear whispers of lenders who aren't doing that because it's they're the just the commissions, the mortgage finance system in the United States with our current restrictions, regulations. It's just a lot of people are trying. It's just aren't ways to kind of
Yeah.
weasel in the commission. But what I am seeing is some bankers really. This is really interesting. I applaud this. Uh, the idea of partnering a mortgage loan with a personal loan.
Yeah.
The personal loan is for paying the commission and using the home, like the property purchase, as collateral for the personal loan. So you are essentially creating it's like a mini second mortgage, but it's not
Hmm.
called a mini second mortgage. It's not, yeah, it is, it serves functionally the same, but it's still a little sticky because you're trying to get a loan on a property you don't actually own yet as
Right.
collateral. So there's a lot of really interesting conversation happening around this. I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm glad I'm not a mortgage broker right now. The opportunity for innovation is huge. I'm just glad someone else is doing it.
One final question
Yeah.
for you, and this is just a prediction, and understanding that
Yep.
you know you may or may not have the crystal ball accurately or clear on this one, because I've talked to a lot of different people who have a lot of different answers to this. Do you suspect this fall we start to see 0% co-ops? And if I mean, you technically have started to see them a bit now. Will that become more normalized in the next, let's say 12 months?
Mhm.
Or curious to get your thoughts on what your prediction is.
Yeah. Um, so I think the answer to that is yes, but it's by sector of the real estate market. And what I and this is not going to be God, I'm going to get so much crap for saying this. I'm sorry in advance to the people who love and care about me and have to read this stuff. But I mean, here's the reality: poor people are going to be affected much more substantially by this move than rich people.
Yeah.
And what I mean by this is we are going to see 0% co ops on the low end of the market. We are going to see folks for whom $6,000 is a life changing amount of money, frankly. Um, those folks are going to opt for a 0% a co-op commission on the sale of their $200,000 home, because that's $6,000 right there. If you're dividing up, a traditional 6% commission rate, that 3% means a lot to them. And um, again, for better or worse, if you are buying a home that is $200,000, your the likelihood that you will be able to foot the bill for that commission rate is lower. It's just statistically is lower. Folks who are buying $200,000 homes, more than 50% of them um, couldn't weather more than 45 days unemployed, let
Sure.
alone have an extra $6,000 sitting around for their real estate commission. So uh, the answer is yes. We are going to see this, and consumers are going to become empowered by this settlement at the low end of the market to find opportunities to save money where they can. But it will be to their own market detriment, I'm sorry
Yeah.
to say. One thing I do want to throw out here, though, is in the higher ends of the market, I think we are much less likely to see this. And in the luxury end of the market, I think it will be almost never will we see this. And I will speak very briefly on the fact that I spent all week last week in Los Angeles at an event that my team at Luxury Presence put on for the top 1% of real estate professionals in the entire country. I had a chance to speak with dozens of extraordinarily high performing real estate professionals, many of whom, I'm not going to name names here, but many of whom appear on Bravo and Netflix and all the different places where you glamorize and romanticize the life of a real estate agent. Um, a lot of these folks are already telling me we've been having these conversations with our
Right.
clients for years, for years. We prove to them how much we are worth
Yeah.
at the first conversation. And there is an understanding that we are working, we are demonstrating this value, and there is a financial literacy on the part of the buyers in those situations and sellers to realize, yeah, the I'm stroking the check for the buyer's commission relative to the way that the proceeds shake out. But it's the buyer who's bringing the funds to the table in order to actually secure the property. So I think it will happen more frequently on the low end. It'll happen less frequently as the prices go up. And once you get north of $1 million, I doubt you'll see it at all.
Yeah, I agree. It certainly just makes logical sense, and so that does impact people purchasing and selling and with lower priced properties disproportionately. And you're right. You do have sellers that are going to say, "I'd like to keep that $6,000." And let's just throw it up and see what happens. Maybe we will get somebody who's willing to do it.
Mhm.
And so I think it'll be a lot of like, hey, let's just give it a shot. And I think we'll see. I hope that I hope that well, I don't know what I hope for. I guess we'll see. We'll see what happens. But anyway, Chris, let's wrap up with your speaking schedule. Do you have any upcoming events that people should be aware of?
Yeah, I sure do, actually. Let's see here. If you are a realtor in Alberta, Canada, I will be at um, an event in Edmonton the week of September 16th, 17th, and 18th. And boy, I wish I had the name of that event right on the top of my head, but I do not. So if you're in Canada, first of all, hello, eh? Glad to see you. And you probably know what I'm talking about here. I can't recall the name of the event, but if you're in Canada, if you're in Edmonton, I'd love to see you. If you are heading to the NAR conference in Boston this November, I will be a featured speaker there. If you are a realtor in New York, New Jersey, or Pennsylvania, I will be in at Triple Play in Atlantic City this December. And there's a couple other things that are kind of cooking along the way, but those are the big ones. So I'd love to see you. And of course, you can find me on social media. You can go to LinkedIn, search me there. You can go to Instagram. You can go to Threads. I'm not really on Facebook unless you want to see, pictures of what I do every weekend, at the farmer's market, which is kind of boring. So don't follow me on Facebook, but follow me on Instagram and LinkedIn. I'd love to chat with you there.
ChrisLinsell.com is the place to go to follow Chris and all of his thoughts and his schedule as well. And he is eligible. He is able or available rather
Mhm.
to speak at your conference or your
Yeah.
brokerage or a state event. So please consider him. He speaks all over the country every single year, and he's one of the more sought after speakers in this industry. And he just knows a lot, and he's really a dynamic and fun speaker, as you know from the show. So ChrisLinsell.com, please reach out to him. And also, if you're a Luxury Presence client, definitely reach out to him. Let him know what you think of Luxury Presence, which of course is we've had your CEO on Malty's been on our show, which was a really fun episode. He's a neat guy. Anyway, Chris, another great episode. Thank you to Chris from all of our listeners for coming on year after year, month after month, and really sharing some good, solid, timely information about the market and technology too. I know we didn't get too much into tech this month, but we'll maybe hit that next month. And also, on behalf of Chris and myself, thanks to the audience for sticking around to the end. By the way, just as a quick aside, and I don't know why this happened, but we had our best month ever last month. We were up about 40% in downloads, which was substantial for us. So we are doing well. So I don't know if everyone's telling a friend or we just got lucky. Either way, thank you for everyone that listened. And please tell a friend. That will really help us continue to grow. We're so grateful to our sponsors and to everyone who listens to this show. We'll see everybody on the next episode. Thank you, Chris.
DJ, it was a pleasure. So glad to be with you. Thanks everybody for listening and for your support.